just to give you a little perspective of kind of how interest rate futures came about and why they became so popular. The first interest rate contract was actually the Ginnie Mae contract launched by the Board of Trade in October of 1975. You won't see that contract up here because it's been dead for about 30 years, and 25 anyway, right? Several versions just never took hold. But the Board of Trade actually launched the bond contract in 1977 and then filled in with the 10 years in the early 80s and the 5-year and the 2-year in the late 80s and early 90s. So they built a dominant long-term interest rate franchise. And the CME in the late 70s started their toehold in the short-term interest rate franchise with the Treasury bill contract, the 90-day Treasury bill contract that launched in 1976. And then, as I mentioned, the Eurodollar futures contract, which was the first cash-settled contract, which was really quite an innovation because up until that time, everything, just like commodities, was physical delivery. And so the Eurodollar contract was the first cash-settled contract launched in December of '81. Interestingly, and I can remember days when I had to struggle to even sell a 100 lot in the front month Eurodollar in its early days. And I remember an article that was published by a very well-known industry magazine in April of 1982, if I'm not correct, that stated that the Eurodollar futures contract was dead on arrival. Well, that contract is now the largest futures contract in the world today, interest rate futures contract, that is. And I think last month traded an average of 3.5 million contracts a day. They really started to become popular because there was a need. There was a need by dealer banks, by investment managers to hedge interest rates, because remember, it was a bear market. And so the bull market started in about '84, and then people had to, again, continue to hedge. Eurodollar futures actually launched the same year the first interest rate swap contract was done. And that was between IBM and the World Bank, and it was in 1981. Interestingly, Eurodollar futures and the swap market really grew up together, and I would say have a symbiotic relationship which caused both to flourish. Eurodollar futures are simply just a strip, right, of 90-day interest rates that go out 10 years. And really, they are the building blocks of the interest rate curve and give you lots of flexibility to hedge any portion of that curve and hedge your short-term interest rate exposure out through 10 years. So the flexibility of that contract actually helped the interest rate swap market grow and flourish and become what it is today. Just quickly, another reason why the markets flourished was because all healthy contracts, interest rate or not, need to have a diverse set of users and uses. And that's really one of the ingredients to healthy futures contracts periods and healthy markets. And so I would also comment, again, putting my career coach hat on, that not only is diversity one of the key ingredients to healthy markets, but it's also a key ingredient to healthy organizations and healthy industries. And I know that a lot of you out there are probably very quantitative, have great analytical skills. How many have those strengths, right? I think a lot of people feel like futures markets, particularly interest rates, that you have to have strong math skills, quantitative skills, analytical skills, and there are plenty of opportunities for those types of people in interest rates. I would also say, however, there are, in the futures industry, there's plenty of opportunities for people who have right brain dominant, and I know because I am one of those people. And so, you can flourish as well in the futures industry if you're right brain instead of left brain. What are the opportunities there? Sales and brokerage, any client-facing or customer service role really requires high emotional intelligence and good people skills. And I think, one of the things that made me a good broker for 23 years on the floor was my ability to be able to really relate to clients and also be able to connect the dots and think strategically and have kind of that vision of where the market was going. That's very right brain. So if you didn't get all A's in math, don't worry, there's a role for you in the futures industry. And there's lots of new opportunities. In addition to having an opportunity because the bear market is, I think, definitely starting. The changing regulatory landscape with Dodd-Frank is creating some new opportunities for interest rate futures and for the futures industry in general. You've probably all read a lot about OTC clearing and the mandates for interest rate swap clearing, and certainly CME has built a great infrastructure and a great business and will be a dominant force in that market. But what's going to happen, and what that has allowed the exchanges to do, is to actually be introduced to a whole new set of clients, particularly end users, investment managers, and their clients, pension funds, that have never really used exchange-traded products before. You know why? Because, well, it was just really easy. You know, the higher margin swaps were a higher margin business, and so the dealer banks were really promoting those instead of lower margin futures contracts and future solutions to their clients. But these clients now understand the value, particularly in a post-Lehman environment, of central counterparty clearing. They also understand that futures contracts, again, are transparent and liquid and deep. And so you're starting to see many clients who have historically used swaps now start to use futures contracts to replicate the same trading strategies that they've used interest rate swaps before. And so that brings me to my last slide, which is because of that, and again, one of the key benefits of using futures instead of even cleared OTC swaps is the cost savings. At the exchange level, and Dodd-Frank has mandated this, futures are actually margined on a 1-day basis, and OTC cleared swaps are margined on a 5-day basis. So to actually use futures to hedge your interest rate risk instead of the same swap equivalent, it's a fraction of the cost from a margin savings. And one of the challenges, and so you can use Eurodollar futures, you can use Treasury futures, but a lot of people have been wanting to use swap futures to hedge instead of those because they didn't want any basis risk, right? If I use a 10-year swap, they wanted to be able to have an equivalent future which would really give them no basis risk and give them the equivalent hedge. And the new deliverable swap futures contract, which was launched last December by CME, is really starting to, it answers the question and it solves the problem that other swap futures contracts up until now have had. And that is, it's deliverable, right? So the prior contracts were settled on a cash basis. We all know, if we've read anything about the LIBOR scandals, and again, people marking LIBOR, banks manipulating LIBOR, there was a general distrust by many market participants of the rate that would, for the final settlement for a cash-settled swap futures contract. This takes that out of the equation. It gives the clients an option to actually take delivery of the swap or to roll it, or just let it roll off, which is really a very innovative twist to, and has solved I think, the biggest issue that ever existed around swap futures. So I think that this is really kind of the next big innovative product for CME. And it's only about 6 or 7 months old, but again, like Eurodollar futures, these things take a few years to catch on, and a few years from now, I think that you'll see big things for the deliverable swap futures contract.